Hey gang, it is Wednesday. I know I sound really excited, and I'm excited because I have 1/2 day left of work, and that is tomorrow. That's right. Not going on vacation, but it's only a half day, and then it starts what I like to call a weekend. My wife calls it more work, but I call it a weekend, so that's all that really matters. Guys, we are the dentists in the know. I am with one of my besties in the whole wide world, Dr. Jennifer Bell. Unfortunately, Dr. Chad Duplantis couldn't be with us tonight. We will miss him, but we'll talk about him some too. Hopefully, he always kicks in a little bit, right? He's always watching, even when he says he can't be here. So we'll say some
He's
bad
always
things.
watching.
Maybe he'll show up. Maybe he'll chime in. Anyway,
Yeah.
we are your backstage pass.
I don't think he trusts us.
What's that?
I don't think he trusts us.
No, I don't blame him.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, we are your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. All of us are educators. All of us are business owners. All of us are obviously practicing dentists. And our job is to bring all of you in the know. So just me and JB tonight, and a very special guest. For those of you who don't know, tonight on the show, we have Steve Parker from The Profitable Dentist. And he has been speaking. He's worked with Woody Oakes, who started The Profitable Dentist. And really, he was just one of the leaders and one of the first guys to get out there and make us feel comfortable about talking about the numbers in dentistry and understanding profitability and saying it's okay to run this like a business, because even though we're dealing with human beings, at the end of the day, we still have to take a paycheck home from what we've done, and we need to be able to account for those things. And it's really not a good thing to just be the ignorant dentist who takes home whatever is left over at the end of the day. So anyway, I'm really excited to talk to Steve, and really the timing probably could not have been better, because I'm literally about to pull what little hair I have left out. So maybe if I pull all the gray ones, the brown ones will start growing back. I don't know.
So it's actually really interesting that you talked about iTero tonight, because the top leading story of tonight's Dentist in the Know news is that Align officially filed a lawsuit on January 3rd against Smile Direct Club, and it went public today. So they are alleging, that Smile Direct Club is running campaigns and convincing consumers that their cases are being backed, watched, and overseen by dentists and orthodontists. I do know that that was a recent change for Smile Direct Club. They were looking to partner with local dentists. They would pay them a small fee for a capture and, some type of relationship with the patient, then convert it to a Smile Direct Club case, and then Smile Direct Club would manage it from there. Of course, we all know the interesting history of the relationship between Align and Smile Direct Club. And, what 10, 15 years has led to is now Align is trying to call Smile Direct Club to the carpet and say you can't continue to practice or can't continue to operate this way any longer. So we'll be watching that very intently. It did go into the California court system, so who knows what will come of that, but certainly an interesting recent legal development.
That is interesting.
I thought so. I thought you might also find it interesting that we are finalists for a Dr. Bicuspid Cuspy. I thought you'd find that interesting. So, we're new to this process of being in the cuspy pool. And we were a semifinalist. Now we're finalists. There's 2 left in the dentist influencers of the year category.
Do we have to answer questions like we want world peace?
Yes, I think this is the question. And for you, it is the swimsuit portion.
Yes. And all the children should be fed. And all we really want at the end of the day is world peace.
every day.
I hope
Every
that
day.
scores. Okay.
Um,
No, thank
yes.
you everyone
So
for
now
that. Yeah.
we could not, I mean, obviously we wouldn't even be a finalist if all the support that we had. I had so many people texting me, sending me screenshots of them voting and, you know, participating in the process. Now our fate is in the hands of an expert panel who will make the ultimate decision on whether or not we are the influencers of the year. So rest assured, our faithful followers, there's nothing more you can do to carry us over this threshold. We must do it on our own work and merit at this point in time. But it's really just an honor to continue to be included as part of this process.
We cannot stuff the ballot box. There's no way, there's no possible way
Is this
for us
Arizona?
to stuff the ballot box.
You want a hanging Chad?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, let's hang
I'm sure
Chad.
you can figure it out.
Let's hang Chad anyway.
Just for kicks.
Just for kicks, let's hang Chad.
That might get us the award. That might get us the award because that would be very influential.
Yeah, that would be good. Well, great news. Anything else?
Two more things. Massachusetts is back in the news again. Of course, we talked about them in late fall of 2022 because of the question 2 on their ballot, doing the medical loss ratio issue that they were voting for at that time. They were successful at the ballot. They wasted no time. Also had a suit and won against Aspen Dental for some nefarious marketing practices. And so, again, we're seeing Massachusetts taking a pretty firm stance on patient protection and ensuring that patients are receiving the quality and standard of care that they are both paying for and deserve, and also making sure that good quality providers continue to stay in the state and are reimbursed at a fair rate. So it's nice to continue to see that state wanting to protect their providers and their patients accordingly. The last thing I'll mention, and it's mostly because of the individual we have on tonight, HPI, which is the data release that the ADA has been collecting really routinely over the last couple of years. This is probably one of the most interesting statistics, I think, Jeff, that you will find that has come out of this data. And it shows since 2005, there's been a pretty strong precipitous decrease in the number of practice owners amongst dentists, and it's in all age categories, probably for the first time. So we're seeing a drop in every age. So the real sweet spot, when you look at the data for practice ownership, is usually between 35 and 50. Most dentists sort of will gravitate towards practice ownership during that time. And even in that sweet spot of both, having some experience, maybe some of the debt management from school has been managed a little bit. You're feeling more confident about your skills. Maybe financially, you're in a better position to be able to own. Even that metric is dropping, and not as many, we'll say, mid-career dentists are jumping in to own practices. So I think continues to be an interesting trend that we need to stay on top of. What's really scary is that the 30 to 35 or under 35 is less than 10% ownership, which is very different than where it had been. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up the exact statistic here. But my mouse is not wanting to cooperate. Anyway, I'll post those statistics for our group. It's pretty significant, the drop. And in those categories where you think that's probably the sweet spot for folks to own, and they're either selling or they're not entering practice ownership altogether.
That's really an interesting concept, because that means that they are either selling to DSOs or to larger corporates, or they're saying, I'm making a whole lot of money working for a DSO or a corporate. And so there's really no need, or maybe even working for another dentist and doing so well that they don't see practice ownership as being a worthwhile venture. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think too, just in the forums I follow and stuff, that there's a couple of things at play. We've got 50% female doctor proportions in a lot of those age demographics under probably 40, 45. And their ability to own and manage and do all the things that, I'm on Mommy Dentist in Business, and that's a pretty consistent theme, is many of them are owning practices and finding all the challenges, just like I expressed in the opening segment tonight. It is extremely difficult to be a full-time working mom, practice owner, and raising kids and doing all the things that you feel I feel inclined and responsible to do. It's both a burden and a blessing simultaneously. So I think that is a statistic that also can't really be ignored, is how the demographics of dentistry is changing at the same time, and what is that impact on practice ownership as well.
A great job as always. Thank you for always looking into all of what's going on and keeping everyone out there in the know. But we have a really great guest that is waiting in the wings very patiently. Somehow, even just you and I, we managed to go over a couple of minutes on that little segment. But I want to talk a little bit. I was going to have Jennifer do the introduction because she actually is the one who brought the guest to us tonight. But when I heard who it was, I was so excited because this group has had a tremendous impact on me and my practice and my philosophies and what I would call my business acumen, which, compared to a lot of people in the business world is here. But for dentists, I'd say it's halfway decent. In the early 90s, when I started my practice, dentists didn't really talk a lot about the finances of their practices. Everyone just kind of, they were sole proprietors. A few of them actually went into a corporate entity and started a corporate entity. But for the most part, most dentists were just solo practitioners, and they were, sole proprietors from a tax perspective, meaning they just had their business and whatever was left over at the end of the day was their profit. And that's what they paid taxes on. And, they just learned, I can just spend what I take home at the end of the month minus what I owe for taxes. And that never sat really well with me. I always wanted my finger more on the numbers within my practice, because it's really hard to make anything better if you don't know where to start, if you don't really know what the problem is. So as I was growing my practice, I was like, who's out there that's really talking about the numbers and saying that it's okay to talk about profitability in practice and that it doesn't make you a bad human being because you want your business, which is the business of dentistry, that you want to be able to take enough money home to support your family and put money away for your retirement, because no one else is putting that retirement money away for you. So I wanted to know about all these things, and I wanted to learn about KPIs and which I didn't know what a KPI was at the time. But I wanted to know what the important numbers were that I should be looking at every month. How should I be looking at profitability? And that's when I found the Profitable Dentist and Dr. Woody Oakes. And he'd been doing this since the 80s. I found him when he was still on fire in the early 90s, just out there lecturing all the time. And dare I say, I had cassette tapes that I would listen to on long rides just to kind of figure out where I was and try to learn some of this stuff. And he really developed the Profitable Dentist into quite a business. Excellence in Dentistry. They had seminars, they had DVD sales, they were, just everything going on. Of course, the Profitable Dentist Magazine, which is still booming today. Well, fast forward into 2015, and Steve Parker had been working with Dr. Oakes for a while and helped him take some really deep dives into a lot of the business workings. This is a gentleman who just has a ton of business accolades behind him. He'd worked in accumulating dental labs. He had accumulated dental practices, bought and sold practices, made them more profitable. He'll tell you more about that. But I just want to introduce Steve Parker, who is now president and CEO of The Profitable Dentist. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Profitable Dentist Magazine, and he's bringing a renewed energy to the continuing work of the founder, Dr. Woody Oakes. So now for almost 30 years, the Profitable Dentist Magazine, the conferences, the CE courses, the newsletters, the Mastermind Club, and the networking events, they've helped tens of thousands of dentists become better practice owners. They've awarded over 1 million hours in CE, and Steve has really now just expanded the Profitable Dentist network of resources into a whole new entity. So I'm going to bring Steve on.
Did he kick himself
there?
off?
Oh no!
No, I'm back. I'm back.
That
was magic. A trick, JB. That was a trick right out of. That's the chat playbook.
Totally.
Steve, welcome. Thank you for being patient, and thank you for taking the helm of really what I think was a pioneering venture in dentistry, something that needed to be out there, and something that I think is even more important now because of the changing face of dentistry. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. First of all, congratulations on your nomination. We'll see. If a ballot box needs stuffed, I'll see what I can do to help with that. And also, I wanted to thank you for really recognizing what we're doing here to keep what Woody started. Keep what he did baked into the DNA of the business. While a lot of people in this industry are moving fast forwarding to new technologies, it leaves a lot of practice owning dentists behind. And, so we're very committed to that segment, to practice owning dentists. And that's, basically why Woody started the company and why we do what we do today.
So would you do us a favor for everyone out there? Because I've been in the mix because I'm old, hence the gray all over. And I learned tonight that pulling the gray out does not make dark grow back. JV just filled me in on that. But because I've been around so long, I've got to witness a lot of this and the beginnings or near the beginnings of this great company and what you've done. Would you mind maybe telling us and sharing with all the dinks out there where you came into this, a little bit about your background, where you came into this and the transition, and then where you are now?
Wow. Awesome. So first of all, we're allowed to drink, right?
Okay.
Yes. What do you
Just saying. I have this.
Cheers.
Oh, yes. Cheers.
Cheers,
and
guys.
I did want to show there are a few dentists out there who have been on some of our bourbon tours and bourbon trails that recognize this. So
yes.
We started, because I live outside of Louisville, Kentucky, a bourbon brand. You can't buy it. I have to give it to you. You have to have a license to sell it. Well, I just have a bunch of barrels of bourbon that we age and we bottle. And there are a number of docs who said, oh, you got to take some Painless Parker. And I think a lot of people don't know Painless Parker was like the first really flamboyant dentist. If you don't know who he was, you should look him up. He really was the first DSO owner. He was the first dentist to advertise. He had a big long string of lawsuits with the ADA and a lot of other people, which, we don't think about. It's 100-something years later. But that's why we named it. I actually bought the rights to the name Painless Parker. So that's what I'm doing tonight.
Good for you.
A little bit of Painless Parker. So
that is awesome.
It's late enough to be painless. Likewise.
That's right. There you go. Cheers.
And cheers, JB. You got
so,
Savlog?
Yeah. To answer your question, is that what it is? That's my wife's favorite.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
To answer your question, I'm an entrepreneur. I actually worked for somebody for 3 years. I sold a company, and as dentists who sell their practice knows, the people who buy it, they want you to stay on as long as they can keep you. And really, they just want to kind of fund the business and let you keep doing what you're doing. But very few people sell their business with the intention of working for somebody else. So, we negotiated. They wanted 7 years. I wanted 6 months. They would settle for 5, and I would settle for 1. And we ended up with 30 months, I think, and I stayed for 36, and it was fine. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I like building businesses. I'm not the world's greatest at running a business. I know that, so I hire really good people to do that. But I do really good at taking something like the Profitable Dentist brand and moving it forward with what Woody was able to do. If you were, we were talking ahead of time, if you were a dentist in the 90s, you probably got something in the mail from EID or the Profitable Dentist every 10 days. We were in the mail every 10 days. So it was DVDs, wow. It was cassettes, it was courses, it was our Destined Spring Break seminar, it was the magazine. And that's how it worked, because that was the only mechanism we had. And we would spend, we'd spend $1 million on postage. Today, docs just don't open their mail. They get so much of it. So you've got to find another way to get through. So that's really what all that we've done to change this business. I've been in the restaurant equipment business. I've been in the utility power industry. I owned a telecom infrastructure company. Each time I would sort of exit and then move to the next thing. And I got into the dental industry in about 2005 by buying dental labs on the advice of a friend. Never forgiven him for that. That evolved into dental practices. That evolved into coaching. That evolved into, I actually bought Woody's original practice, Woodside Dental. That evolved into a lot of different things. And in a conversation at Woody's house one night, he just asked if I could help with the magazine. And really, it fundamentally is doing what we're doing today. We're taking what worked for 20, 25 years and moving it into different distribution, different ways of learning, different ways of using the same content that we always had. So that's how I got here.
And so now, where Woody used to do a good bit of lecturing, obviously a lot of lecturing, and as in many businesses, that was kind of the promotion for what he was doing. People would see him at the Hinman or at Chicago Midwinter and be like, oh, now I get it. And,
right.
That was the inroad to, becoming a member or, or having a subscription to the Profitable Dentist or to the DVD series or something. So are you doing much of that right now?
So we do, we're, I'm trying to think of the word, reimagining live events. And because that's a great question. The people that you knew in the 90s and into the 2000s, the model would be try to speak at an event, try to speak at the Hinman or the Midwinter or at the Destined Spring Break seminar, try to speak at TBSE, my good friends Rich and Dave, awesome. Try to speak at Dental Town. I think the first time Howard Fran spoke was at one of our events. And so, I think Jennifer, Linda Miles is how we got in touch. Love Linda, so we helped start those careers because we had a stage and we had people in front of that stage who would go back and say, gee, I need a little coaching, or gee, I could use a little help with hygiene, or, the dynamic that came from that was sort of the magic in it, even though we didn't know it at the time. An interesting story that Rick Workman will tell you. He started Heartland. I don't know if you know this, Jeff, but he was at our Destined Spring Break seminar. Good man. His dentistry was his backup career. His dad, he had a degree in farming. His dad was a farmer, and he said, farming's tough. You need something to, fall back on. So he said, I'll go to dental school. He didn't like being the dentist. And he said, he's told this story many, many times. He said, I was sitting with about 1,200 dentists. They all hated running their practice, but they love being a dentist. And he said, I'm sitting here thinking, dentistry is not my thing, but I really like running the business. So he sat there having lunch with somebody and said, hey, what if I run the business part, you be the dentist, and I take a percentage? I don't even know what we call this, but I'll be your business manager. He did that first one on the patio at Sandestin Resort at our meeting. And from there grew Heartland Dental. So a lot of things in dentistry are just by people getting together, dentists getting together, practice owners getting together and figuring out what they like and don't like. And I think one of the things you said, Jennifer, is, and I've got the HPI, the fresh off the press one. I get these things kind of early. And I think there are a lot of things in those numbers that as an industry, we don't understand. So one of the things that I'm able to do is look through that and say, well, I kind of see that. I think you're looking at the wrong thing. I think there's something that's more there. So that's kind of, in fact, one of them I wrote down while you were talking is I know how these are calculated. So yes, there are fewer and fewer and fewer docs, but there are more and more and more groups. And one of the things we'll talk about here in a minute is non-dentist owners. Or if the three of us got together and formed a practice, whose average age do they use? Well, the interesting thing is the ADA doesn't know. So they take whoever sent it back in. And, if you're the president, they say, I think you're probably 32, 33. So they would put your age down and say, what do you know? We've got a practice here that's owned by a 33-year-old and ignore the two of us. So this industry doesn't have those, to Jeff's point, KPIs defined yet, where a lot of other industries really do. We're all measuring the same way. We're all taking data in the same method. We're all calculating it the same way. Dentistry just doesn't have that yet. And while I love my friends at the ADA, they're figuring this out as they go too. So,
and that's a shame because, as I mentioned, then it makes it really difficult to be responsive to that or to figure out, if the true sentiment amongst doctors is practice ownership is becoming too arduous and too cumbersome to be able to manage and do the technology and keep up with the continuing education and all the things that are now put upon doctors to manage simultaneously. There's a lot to learn from that and opportunities for businesses to flourish amongst that. If we understood what the data was really telling us.
Right. Right. Or opportunities. And if we so I see dentistry as three audiences. And, a decade ago, we said dentist. And we talked about, like we're talking now, about your KPI and your entrepreneurship and hiring and firing. And we can't find hygienists. And that's not the dentist part. That's the entrepreneur part. And we just assumed that if you're going to dental school, in fact, we're going to talk about these 5 trends. And I have a little white paper. I'll put a link. You can download this and go through all that. There's a lot of numbers. But one of the numbers that's in here that I always cite is 13% of Americans own their own business. 13% own their business. 19% of business school graduates, they went to school for business. 19% own their business, and 67% of them fail every year. 2/3 fail. Harvard Business School graduates, arguably the best business school in America, right after Indiana University. 3.5% of Harvard MBAs start a business. And again, the exact same 67% fail at it within 3 years. You know how many dentists come out of dental school and start a business? 84%.
Wow.
So for some reason, just by going to dental school, you've decided that you're going to be a business owner. Now, what's more interesting is if you look at physicians, if you look at accountants, if you look at any other professions, physicians are probably the highest. They are, I think it's 12%, but those are through hospital groups. Not when's the last time you saw a sole practicing physician? So they're the highest percentage, and that's only through a hospital group where they just contract with the hospital and they handle the rest of the business. They handle insurance and filings and all that. And as dentists, again, 84% of dental school graduates up to this point just assume you're going to run the business. So it's this interesting thing that I saw when I came into this, which is why, look at that, which is why there's an assumption that those two things go together. Being a dentist means being a practice owner. The interesting thing is there are two competing mindsets: left brain dentists who think like managers. They're protocol driven. They manage what's in front of them. Right brain entrepreneurs who deal with what comes at them because they know you can't construct that. You can't, I mean, nobody predicted COVID, but dentists say, all right, let me find a textbook. Let me go back to my dental school business textbook from fourth year and find out what to do when a pandemic hits. I mean, they're making it up as they go. That will drive you crazy as somebody who spent 4 years in dental school. As an entrepreneur, you say, you know what, maybe it's an opportunity to thin the ranks a little bit. Maybe it's an opportunity to put in a new system that we need. Maybe it's an opportunity. I'm here. I've got to run this thing. Let me use this as an opportunity. It's two competing mindsets. So part of what I see going on is the first most impactful thing in dentistry today is non-dentist owners. And what I mean by that is, and let me back up, I break dentists into three groups. Dentists, they could work for Heartland. They don't care about what the Profitable Dentist puts in its magazine. They don't need to worry about accounts receivable. They don't need to worry about hiring a hygienist and how tough it is. And they don't need to worry about, ROI on a new piece of equipment. They show up, do the dentistry they want to do. At 5 o'clock, they go, to their kids' tennis practice or soccer practice, and somebody else takes care of it. And if they're there 20 years, they might be part of an ESOP or profit sharing, and they bank some money, but it's not even on their radar screen. Those are younger docs. They have decided that being an employee, as this whole thing evolves, can be better. And then they're practice owning dentist, owner dentist, who is my audience. They are owners and dentists, and they had an education for one and started figuring the other one out the day that they graduated from dental school. And, I know it frustrates a lot of people when I say this. To be honest, there are a lot of practice owning dentists who are really better employees. And, I have a very good friend who filed bankruptcy twice. I connected him with a large DSO and said, I love you. You're a good guy. You're a great dentist, but you're not a very good business owner. He is now one of the top performers, produces $2.2 million a year and loves it. And at 5 o'clock, he's finished. He gets to go home. He got to see his kids play soccer. It's a mindset. But what's happened in dentistry is we feel that's a weakness somehow. And part of my mission is to break that and say, you've got to choose to be the entrepreneur. You're already the dentist. Too many practice owning dentists, I think, put the two together, and they shouldn't. Failing at owning a business doesn't mean you're failing as a dentist. You still have a degree, you still have a license, you're still a dentist. As my good friend Craig Spodak says, if this whole thing blows up tomorrow, I'm still a dentist. Maybe I like Colorado better than Florida. So as a business owner, we understand that. And then the third is non-dentist owners. And let me tell you who they are. The fastest growing dental practice right around me was started by a 31-year-old business school graduate from Ball State University who worked for Henry Schein for 2 years as a salesperson and said, wow, I think I could do this better. In 3 years, he's put together 18 practices, probably has a valuation of 20-something million dollars, but it took him 3 years. And every dentist around here has PO'd that he's allowed to do that. Well, they're allowed to do that. They're just spending their day focused on the dentistry, working in the business, He's spending his day working on the business, and he hires really good people and puts together a clinical team and says, hey, how should we vote on this? And how big should bonuses be if we hit these numbers? And if we need to buy pieces of equipment, now we got to buy 18 of them, not just one. So we can haggle for better pricing. We got to buy this many supplies. I'm going to haggle for, a 50% drop in supply cost. We're doing a lot of crowns. I'm going to go to these horrible insurance companies. And basically, if we can't get our crown fee, we're out. And what do you know? If it's one doc who's going to do that, not to name names, not to name Delta Dental, they could care less. But if you have 18 offices and you have a big footprint in a metropolitan area, they're listening to you. So these non-dentist owners don't understand why it's so hard. And a practice owning dentist who's done this for 25 or 30 years can't understand why it seems so simple. There must be some magic. And the magic does come into that working in your business versus on your business. And so what I always say when I speak is, you don't be worried about Heartland. Heartland has a very specific formula. They're not the ones who's going to put an office in down the street and gobble you up. It's nothing personal. They just want to complete a footprint. And, it's like McDonald's. They just want a restaurant on every corner. Somebody looks at a map and says, hey, we have an empty spot. Let's put one here. It's the groups of 4, 5, 6, 7 docs who come together and say, okay, let's start our own little group. We understand we can aggregate services. We can have actually 2 people who do nothing but manage insurance claims. We got a lot of buying power with our equipment. So back to your question earlier, Jeff, about KPI, it's very fluid because you can make those kind of deals and changes that a business person, somebody with not even an MBA, comes out of Ball State and goes in and says, hey, this is what we're paying for supplies. Hey, Shine, here's what we're paying. Here's what Patterson's offering. And I'm going to pick by Friday, take a stab. And it's going to be a 3-year deal. They know how to do that. They don't have to have a phone call and then cut it off real quick to go see a patient. So non-dentist owners are really the competition, but not DSOs. So same thing. If there's 6 docs in a practice, I have a practice right over here that has 6 dentists. So in the ADA's statistics about ownership, they're not even counting five dentists, 5 people. They all have ownership in the practice, but the ADA doesn't know how to account for those people. So if that sort of answers that, it's not an indictment of the ADA. It's just that these things are evolving so rapidly, they're not even really sure how to account for them. So that's the first one. Non-dentist owners. They are the fastest growing segment of dentistry. And it's the under 25 practices. It's not Heartland and Aspen and the big DSOs. It's the small groups that are putting together a group, realizing the efficiencies that come with that. And, it's no different than a hospital group for a group of physicians. They're saying, hey, we'll own the group. We'll contract with, somebody else to do the business piece of it. And we all still own it. We own the charts, the patient charts. And, it's a pretty good business model, but it's scary if you graduated, in 1987 and you've been gutting it out for 25 years and are trying to figure out why you can't sell your practice right now.
So that's an important point, Steve, that we were talking about earlier was, the old model of dentists, particularly my age, who are really, hopefully have been thinking about some type of an exit strategy or working towards that exit strategy. I mean, the old play was bring in an associate, let them get used to the practice, have them buy into the practice, and then eventually sell the practice to them, work for a couple of years and exit that way. Tell us about why that is really not something that dentists should be doing anymore. And why, you mentioned it to me very clearly that it can actually work against you, even if you think that you're bringing the right person and you're going to carry the legacy of your practice on,
Mhm.
and all these great things are going to happen and you're going to get crowned with a halo.
Mhm.
But how that can actually work against you, and how you can end up getting less than what your practice is actually worth if you do that.
So two interesting things happened in the last, say, 7 to 10 years. One was accounting. So, we had a conversation about KPI and profit margin. And there was this interesting thing in dentistry before 2000, before money got tight, we'll say. The real estate bust, money got tight, you couldn't borrow for whatever. Banks started to figure out that the way we valued a dental practice was all of the costs tallied up except for the doctor's pay, because the doctor was the owner. And I will tell you this, I can't tell you, and my degree is management and finance. And, part of me felt like I should speak up. And part of me said, if you're dumb enough to loan that kind of money to a dentist in a dental practice like that, that's on you. So banks would look at this and say, wow, look at the profit in this business, but they didn't count the doctor's pay. Well, that's the number one expense. In fact, sometimes the doctor's pay would be more than all the other employees combined. They're taking a big chunk out. Now they want to sell that practice and they still want to get that pay, and they want to get a big fat paycheck at the end of the day. So we used to calculate EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, which is if you go over here to Indiana University Business School, you're going to know that your first year. You're going to understand what it means. And basically it means profit. It's what's left over after costs and expenses and the cost of money and all that junk. It's profit is fundamentally what it is. So if I could say, man, my business has a 40% profit margin, 40% EBITDA, that's big. Grocery stores operate on 3, and they're billion-dollar companies. 40% was unheard of until banks started to really look into it and said, how come this is going bust? We loaned money. People always ask me, what's my practice worth? And I'll say, number one, it's worth what somebody will pay you. Number two, they'll pay you what they can borrow. So up until 10, 12 years ago, you could borrow a lot on a dental practice. Well, suddenly what's called generally accepted accounting principles changed that and said the owner's pay is included, whether it's payroll, whether it's taking dividends, whether it's just writing them a check, whatever it is, it's part of it. So suddenly that EBITDA came way down. In fact, some practices were losing money if you included the doctor's pay. Your whole business is largely based on a multiple of EBITDA, multiple of profit. And so to sort of take this a little further, I'll explain how that works. Say your EBITDA is $250,000 and you want $1 million for your practice. If I give you that $1 million, I need that practice to do exactly what it's been doing for the last 3 years, which produces 250 grand. And in 4 years, I will have gotten my money back for that $1 million. The 5th year, I'm making $250,000. The 6th year, I'm now making $250,000 more dollars. So it's basically a multiple. So when somebody says, I'll pay you 5 times earnings or 5 times EBITDA, they basically mean they're going to get that investment back in 5 years or 4 years or whatever the multiple is. A DSO could pay, the highest I've seen is 17 times. So, and that was for a 12 dentist group. And they were able, to your point earlier, Jeff, they were able to go in and look at it and say, you guys are paying way too much for supplies. We'll cut the supply cost in half. They're not getting 10% off. They're cutting it in half. You've got too many employees and you've got a lot of family here. And we can do a KPI that says you have about 1.3 times the employees you need. And not that we're going to start cutting people just to meet a number, but why do we have 3 people at the front desk every day when, our patient flow doesn't warrant it? Well, it's because it's somebody's sister's cousin's stepfriend or whoever, and we brought them in and they're still here. And, you know how it goes in a small business. They look at it and say, we can fix that immediately. insurance reimbursements. You're getting $470 for a crown. They're going to get $1,100 for a crown. So they just doubled that revenue immediately the day they own you. So they're not counting on 17 years to get their money back. They'll do it in 6 months and not change anything except back end stuff that you never knew about anyway. You're writing off 20% of your insurance. I promise you, they're not writing off 20% of the insurance that they're getting twice as much for. So those are KPI that are important. And that's how the value of your business works. So the number one thing I tell docs when they're looking at selling their practice is start now and plan on 3 to 5 years from now and only focus on EBITDA. Doesn't mean you care about money more than patients. What it means is the very first thing a bank is going to ask you for is your last 3 years of tax returns before they loan you money, because they know you can juggle last year's, you can juggle a little, it's January. As a business owner, you can date some stuff back on December 31st instead of January 1st. You can do those things, but you can't go back 3 years. So the first thing is don't start today. You can't imagine how many docs I get that email me today and say, hey, I want to sell my practice by June. And, how do I do that? Well, you go back 3 years. So be conscious of that and understand what the new language is. It's not the dentistry you do. It's not that you're an awesome dentist for value. It's a percentage or a multiple of EBITDA, of earnings. And again, that gets confused with that left brain that says, well, that means I'm just going to, do treatment I don't need to do. That means I'm going to, mistreat patients. That means I don't care about patients. I only care about money. When it really doesn't. What it means is, if I run a candy store and I want to sell that candy store one day or combine 2 more candy stores, that is the number one measure of your business is earnings. And nobody teaches that in dental school. I've seen it 1,000 times when I speak. In fact, I just sat through a consultants meeting where a doctor was up there talking about EBITDA and valuation of your practice if you want to sell to a DSO. And I said, just curious, how many people in here know what EBITDA is? And like every hand went up. And I said, all right, doctors, who wants to stand up and give us a 15-second explanation of what it is? And every hand went down. So they've heard the word, but don't understand it is the most critical number for your business, not your practice, but your business. And again, that can be interpreted a lot of times to mean all you care about is the money. It doesn't. Although, I've been in business my entire life to, make a profit. So doesn't mean I don't care about my customers.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. No, I think doctors really have to understand too, when we run our business, we're usually running it to avoid tax burden. There's a lot of strategic accounting principles and things that you utilize that will help reduce your tax load. So you're kind of, wanting that 3-year runway to really think about flipping what your company looks like on paper to be less tax favorable, maybe short term, but to make it look more profitable long term, so that your evaluation, I think, is a really key point that you can't emphasize enough. If that's really where a doctor is thinking they want to head in whatever stage of career they happen to be in, your accountant can only unwind so much of the things that you've wound up that make you look less profitable on paper. So,
and if you don't want to sell, and if you want to, and by sell, I mean to an associate, to that magic associate that you find that shows up and wants to work for 3 years for, nothing. So you can take more time off and, drive that new big RV that you bought around. They're still going to borrow that money unless they're independently wealthy. And I have a theory that if they have enough dough to buy your practice, they're not working for nothing for the next 3 years. So they're borrowing that money, and the bank loves you, but they are still going to look at numbers. They're going to pass it to a committee that says, why in the world would we loan this much money to a practice? I mean, it's 22 years before they pay us back. It's very simple. Banks don't want to own your practice. They don't want to take it back. So think of it this way. I told you, I still own dental labs. Still have a soft spot for the dental lab business. My entire involvement with the dental lab might be 15 minutes a week, and that's on a conference call. That is by design. So, not that it's in the cards, but if I decided to sell that dental lab tomorrow, I can look at a potential buyer in the face who's looking at a loan officer in the face, and I can say, if Steve Parker goes away tomorrow, this lab's going to produce basically this much profit for the next 3 years, like it did for the last 3 years. Now, if I have all the client relationships, if I'm the number one technician, or if I'm the lead dentist and all the patients love me, you can't leave. The bank is not going to loan you money and let you leave, because what you see is, typically in those situations, not that any of us have ever seen those things blow up 97% of the time, you lose about 50% of your patients and 75% of your staff in the first year. Well, the bank's just loaned you a whole bunch of money, and now you got to start finding new patients because you were counting on them to pay heat, light, rent, taxes, employees, and the bank. So they've just gotten more savvy with how they loan that. So if you're going to sell your sole practice, your single practice, sole doc practice, start today and plan on looking 3 years from now. Have an established earnings pattern, however you do it, and you can back out the car you write off, or the research trip, the dental education you took to Turks and Caicos. They back those out. They accommodate those. That's the beauty. That's the neat part about being a small business owner. I had an accounting professor years ago that said the trick is to learn to bend the rules, but not break the rules. That's why they're written. So bend them as far as you can, use, and get a good accountant. But they'll be able to tell you that, yes, this would pass. That dental meeting. In fact, I will tell you guys, I like you so much. My phone has been blowing up because tonight is the first night of a dental meeting I'm supposed to be at in Cabo. So it's not a dental meeting in Flint, Michigan. It's a dental meeting in Cabo. So that easily is a business expense. They're going to spend 3 days. 2 days will be 2 mornings will be in sessions, and that's a write-off. So, my wife travels with me, and so those are things that you get to do. But when you sell your practice, you've got to understand they're going to back those out, and that goes into your valuation. So
Steve, we're about out of time.
Yes.
We are out of time. We're actually a few minutes over here, and thank you everyone for hanging in there with us a few extra minutes. But we would love to have you back on again, because I really think these are such important topics to be discussing, and even thinking you're just gonna sell to another company, or
right.
to I'm gonna just sell to big corporate. Well, what you said could not be more true. If you are the only person in that practice that has really been in patient contact, then you are the value of that practice, and that contract is only going to be as good for as long as you agree to stay.
Right.
And so I love what you said about maybe taking some of the value away from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said about having this relationship where you can be a clinical manager, a clinical director, and really have the time to coach others and bring others into the fold. Let them get to know your patients. Let them get to know your employees. Really make them a part of the community. And then you're not as important as you were before. And then those numbers are not as critical. The time you have to stay may not be as critical. So I think you brought up so many great points tonight, and I'd love to dive in even more later. But if you would, before we go, would you let everyone know how they can get in touch with you or any information about the Profitable Dentist and your programs?
Yes, you can. My email is steve@theprofitabledentist.com. Anybody who wants a copy of this white paper, it's pretty robust. It's the 5 trends that are impacting or that are shaping practice ownership today. It's basically focused on exactly what we're talking about here, how to understand as a sole practicing doc what's going on. And the interesting thing is, again, number one, non-dentist owners, don't worry about Heartland. Worry about Dave, who sold for Henry Schein for 2 years and now is 20 times bigger. He's done in 3 years what you've tried to do for 25 and still can't double your practice. There's a reason for that. And so we sort of cover that in those 5 topics. And one of them primarily, just if I can leave you with this, it really is where your mindset is as a practice owner. And if you want to be a sole practitioner, you can. You're going to struggle. I can tell you it's not going to get easier. If you're dependent on insurance, Delta Dental is never going to come to you and say, hey, good news. You really rocked it last year. We love you. We're going to start paying you 25% more in reimbursements than last year. Never going to happen. So you have to be fighting things that, are always making less and less and less. And then when you decide to sell, you're not going to get what you need to retire. Not that that's a bad thing. Docs do it every day. But if you do want to do that, if you are a mid-career dentist, to your point, Jennifer, you got plenty of time to put something together, but you have to get your head in the right place as a dentist. And I will share with you kind of in a parting, I'm very good friends with Dr. Wayne Mortensen, started Mortensen Dental, good a man as you'd ever meet. And he will, every time he tells the story, and I always ask him, it's like a setup, about when he had to quit being a dentist. And he operated out of a concrete block building for years. And then he brought in his sons and he brought in his nephews, and it got bigger and bigger. And his CFO came to him one day and says, Dr. Wayne, you got to quit being the dentist. We've got 22 offices. You're more important as the CEO than as a dentist. You got to quit seeing patients. And Wayne is a big, stocky, deep voice, very good man. He will get emotional when he talks about the day he literally had to tell his patients he couldn't see him anymore. Now, they're $250 million this year, a little bit more. So it's turned out well for him, but he had to let go of that. And it's a thing that if you've got 4 years of dental school, it's shocking when you sort of hear that and you think, all right, I hear you, but I don't know that I get that. It seems like an easy decision, but it's not. It's very emotional. It's very real. You spent 4 years in dental school. You love your patients. I have docs tell me they can remember every crown they ever placed. And I have one guy that I've put him to the test, and I think he does. You can pull out an x-ray and he'll say, oh, that's Mrs. Jones. And, you think he's kidding. He doesn't. So there is a connection that the business part of this doesn't understand, that you can build it into how strategically how you run your business. And you were never taught that in dental school. You weren't even taught that after dental school. So, so send me an email, just put in a direct message below or click to me.
You didn't give him your email address yet.
Steve@theprofitabledentist.com. I thought I said that. Steve@theprofitabledentist.com. Or because we're in Facebook, just click me and message me, but I'll make sure that you get that, and willing to come back and chat with as many times as you want. I love your audience. I love your show.
Thank you
so
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and please send us the information too, so we can put a post up for you tomorrow. And Steve, we are over time, but thank you so much for being with us. Jennifer, thank you for getting Steve on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda, for the introduction.
Thank you, Linda Miles, for the introduction. And also, I think we're going to have a little bourbon exchange between us. So
I have a little I have a little something coming your way.
Oh, you're the best. All right, Steve, thank you so much. And Jennifer, anything you want to say to close us out?
No, I'm just so grateful. We're excited about 23 and the growth opportunities that we have and the community we continue to build. We like to say we're the happy hour after the education is over when the real education begins. So thanks for being on the journey with us.
I couldn't have said it better.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next week.
See you.
Good night.
Good night. And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.